Are you strategic? The answer can make or break your business. Welcome to Strategic Minds, the podcast where we'll do a deep dive into conversations with extraordinary leaders and world-class performers to learn how they think, plan, and act strategically. I'm your host, Rich Horwath, author of 8 books on strategic thinking, including my newest book, Strategic. And my vision is to teach the world to be strategic. Now, let's explore Strategic Minds.
We're stuck.
What do we do? I have no idea.
You need a new strategy.
We need a more dynamic strategy.
The strategy?
You have to strategize.
But you won't strategize.
Let's talk a little strategy.
Welcome to Strategic Minds. I'm excited to chat with my guest today, Mo Edjlali. Mo is the founder and CEO of Mindful Leader, the world's largest provider of mindfulness-based stress reduction training, an 8-week evidence-based program teaching meditation and stress management. A computer engineer turned mindfulness innovator, his journey began after a tech venture collapse led him to discover meditation's transformative power. With experience spanning NASA, Fortune 500 companies, and 2 decades in technology, he brings a unique perspective on how practices of awareness and reflection can fuel innovation, resilience, and better decision-making. His new book, Open MBSR, Reimagining the Future of Mindfulness, challenges current mindfulness systems, offering a revolutionary framework for accessible practice. And for those of you watching on YouTube, I have a copy here, and it's highly recommended, and we'll certainly put a link in the show notes to the book as well. Mo, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Rich. Honored to be here.
So let's begin with your origin story. Please share with us where you grew up and how the people there in that environment shaped who you are today.
Oh boy, the origin story. So to start, I was born in Iran, and I was born in Iran before the revolution. You can imagine how crazy that the effects that might have on my parents came to the U.S. I was born in 1977, so came when I was a year old or so, and so grew up right outside of Washington D.C. and in a place called Arlington, Virginia. Shout out to anyone from Arlington out there. And ended up going to Virginia Tech for computer engineering. Graduated in 1998, which for anyone who was in technology was a good year to graduate. It was the starting of the .NET bubble. Worked for Accenture. I was part of their Internet New Media Group, and this was a 250-person organization. We're kind of like the Marines. And this is before everything became internet and new media. Right. This is 1998, just to remind folks. And so I got the chance to work on some really extraordinary projects, things like helping to define USPS's internet strategy and working on like USPS.com or USPS.org at the time. Worked for utility companies and a variety of Pennsylvania Power and Light, just like all sorts of interesting and strange projects they dropped me in on. Eventually became an expert in a particular software platform because at that time, with 2 years experience, you could be an expert very quickly.
Right.
Left Accenture, worked for a small startup that got bought by a bigger startup that eventually got bought by Fair Isaac, and along the way was leading teams, doing all sorts of really cool cutting edge internet e-commerce work, and particularly around customer relationship software and one-to-one marketing technologies. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to try to start my own company, trying to leverage what I'd learned, and started a company with the idea that using technology, I could create pools of talent and pools of companies and reduce the cost for hiring, right? So just to give you the sense, like people at the time would pay tens of thousands of dollars to go kind of headhunt very particular tech talent. And my idea was, why spend all that money when we could create these systems, these ecosystems of talent and organizations, connect the two together at a fraction of the cost. Mm-hmm. And Microsoft loved the idea. And so we went from 0 to 30 people in 3 years. This whole thing was bootstrapped, became a multi-million-dollar company. I was sort of this whiz kid and an innovator around this sort of new way of doing things. And frankly, I didn't really have a solid leadership background. I remember people talking about emotional intelligence. I was like, what is that? Like, who cares about that? Right. I hired a business coach to help me be a better leader. And, I was a young tech guy. When I started the company, I was in my mid 20s, like mid to late 20s. So really figuring things out. I hired a business coach to help me be a better leader. He told me my employees were like horses. One set could take me from point A to B, and I could put them down and get a fresh set to go from point B to C.
Wow.
And so, I thought like, hey, maybe I'm being too soft. I need to be harder. I need to sort of be stronger. I need to be more aggressive. And I tried to adapt that way of doing things. And financially, the company was pretty successful. And I was literally a Microsoft poster boy. Like they actually put my face up on posters and blasted them across DC for a big conference that they had. People were taking pictures of me on the metro and say, hey, I wrote the metro with you today. I was this boy wonder, whiz kid, and thought I had everything figured out. And then 2008, 2009 happened and the economy turned. We were over leveraged. The whole thing fell apart. I went from kind of thinking I had everything figured out, being the most successful in my peer group, to just being wiped out, being flipped upside down and dropped on my head. It was pretty devastating. Fortunately, and I've got a wonderful family that was able to kind of support me as I was figuring things out. And I was still acting like a jerk in this sort of like way, even though I didn't have the company to sort of justify that. And I would look at myself in the mirror and say, who is this guy? Like, what have I become? And I started asking myself, what's this all for? Like after I'd kind of chase after this thing and just like at a snap of a finger, it could all disappear. It could be taken away from me. What was it all for? And in that, I opened up and was willing to explore and was open to ideas and being willing to admit that I didn't have everything figured out and that I had more to learn. And that was the start of my kind of opening up to mindfulness.
Wow. Thank you. That's an amazing journey, Mo. And, I love the vulnerability there. I think a lot of leaders out there can appreciate the fact that, like you said, sometimes we feel like we have to have all the answers and sometimes we feel like we have all the answers. And as you said, and it could be gone in the flash of a second. So, tell us then, it's an interesting and fascinating journey, especially going from a very technical background to what some people would consider a soft background, yet very steeped in tradition, in philosophy. And so maybe you can give us some of the basics, because before I read your book, I've got to be honest, I wasn't really crystal clear on the difference between things like mindfulness and meditation, and should I do guided meditation or self-guided meditation, some of those things. So if you would, share with our listeners a little bit of some of the foundational concepts around mindfulness and meditation, please.
Absolutely. And I think, as you stated, like my background's engineering. And so I'm coming at this with that mindset, and I'm a skeptic. I'm a hard-nosed person. Like, I smell the BS real easy. And so before I would look at mindfulness in the field in that way and just be like, whoa, this is just a lot of woo-woo nonsense and sort of like, what is this? And it wasn't until I had my own experiences. In particular, I would say that there were two things that really stood out. One, I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat where 10 hours a day we would meditate and mostly silence. And it was a wonderful experience where I saw for myself this extraordinary practice could help me really understand my mind. And sometimes the more scientific term is this idea of metacognition. And so being able to kind of understand, to be able to look at my mind as it's working without being caught in it and say, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I'm thinking about that. Oh, I'm getting stuck on this. And being able to zoom out and observe the way my mind operates was just like, wow, like I didn't know that was like a thing or that was possible. And so that was really fascinating. I also, as I was doing this, would realize that a lot of the same thoughts that I had were the same thoughts I had yesterday. And so, 90%, 95% of the thoughts, it's just like rumination and things just kind of over and over and over again, thinking about the same thing. And, and then sort of from a business and a hard-nosed perspective, that's very inefficient. Like just sitting there spinning like a hamster, like just the same stuff over and over again. And through this practice, I found that I was able to get underneath that noise And in the business world and a lot of leadership, there's always this talk about signal and noise and trying to get to the signal, right? Like everyone knows, like it's important to get to the signal, not just get distracted by the noise. But there's so much noise in our minds, and what this did was it allowed me to get through that noise and get deeper and deeper and deeper. And the longer I'd meditate, the deeper I'd get, and things that were, for lack of a better word, kind of buried in my mind would emerge. And sometimes these would be pleasant things, sometimes they would be terrible things, sometimes great ideas, sometimes like, things that had been repressed and sort of that were locked deep in there. And in both ways, like just beautiful thoughts I'd never had before and ideas. I was like, wow, I'd never kind of got into that level of thinking about something. Or like, oh, wow, okay, there's this deep, unaddressed thing that has gone unresolved, that's buried deep in my mind, a thorn that's just kind of been lingering there that I didn't even notice. And being able to kind of pull that thorn out in a way, and just by looking at it and realizing it was there. And fundamentally, with those 10 days and 10 hours a day, um, I was able to change the way I perceive reality. And I know that could sound really sort of matrix-like and like, like I'm taking some funny mushrooms. But that was like possibly, I actually was able to change how I perceive reality through these practices. And this was without, any weird beliefs and things that, that I would question. This was without any chemicals or any sort of weird hypnotic thing. I mean, it was just me and my mind, observing my mind, doing this practice in silence over and over. Like I was able to change the way I perceive reality, and realizing I could change the way I perceive reality, I could change the way I experience reality. And that was just like a huge light bulb, because ultimately, I feel like that's an extraordinary important realization, to know that my mind, almost like a muscle, could be trained. I could exercise it. And that through these exercises, these real practical, step 1, step 2, step 3, like no nonsense, like exercises, that I could change my perception, change how I was experiencing things, and ultimately change myself.
Yeah, it's powerful. You use the word exercise there, Mo, at the end, because I do think that, the average CEO exercises for 45 minutes a day, physically exercises 45, which is actually pretty good. But then when you think about how much time we take to exercise our minds and to your point, step back and really see how is our mind working, I think most of us can admit that we don't do a great job of doing that. So where would, so folks listening to this, where would they begin? Is it meditation? Is there something before meditation? Give us maybe the first couple steps, and obviously we'll get through the book and have folks pick that book up, because it's a really valuable tool, and you do courses and things as well, which can be super helpful. But give us maybe the first couple steps.
Absolutely. And just another analogy I want to make. We all know how important our physical posture is, right? Like when you walk into the room, and then a lot of times there's a lot of focus on sort of the outside, the physical posture showing up a certain way. But I like to think there's also a mental posture, right? Like how is our mind sort of postured to be reactive, to be scared, to be bold, to be courageous, to feel, authentically fine as we are, or to feel like we need to pretend to be something else. And so there's this idea of mental posture. And I think for leaders especially, we all sort of know it when we see it. It's poise, right? Like someone walks in a room, or you just kind of get this feeling. It's like, like, and so just to kind of connect it to, looking fit and being strong and appearing a certain way in that physical posture, there's also this element of mental posture. And I heard just the other day, for folks who might be curious, this just came out. It was a YouTube video by Harvard Business School professor Arthur Brooks, by Harvard Business Review. So we're not talking some, sort of flaky thing. We're talking Harvard Business School. And the whole talk was about this idea of, you need to be bored. Here's why. Is actually the name of the thing. You need to be bored. Here's why. And so even if people aren't necessarily ready to jump into mindfulness and meditation, one thing I would say that is really simple to do, that anyone could do, you could integrate, you don't need to set aside any more time, is an idea that I like to just describe as, and we all know this, but just be alone with your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
be alone with your thoughts. And so I've worked with all sorts of folks in the past, and one friend of mine, high striving, hardworking CEO, was one of these, 30 under 30 guys, right? Like, so like really, and talked about, hey, you might want to try meditation. He's like, I've got no time for meditation. I do my jog in the morning. I do this, I do that. And I was like, dude, just like when you go jogging, turn off the headphones. Just jog in silence, like in your workout, whatever you're already doing, just turn the noise off and just be in silence with your thoughts. And us older folks, like I saw this really great clip where it showed a guy, a little older like us, and he's like, I don't need mindfulness. I remember rewinding the Blockbuster tapes, right? And so I remember rewinding the Blockbuster tapes, like you were bored, like you were alone with your thoughts, like we had no choice, right? Like, and so for us, like we had that, but this younger generation, everything is instant. You have extraordinary power and freedom in your pocket. And so you almost have to force yourself to put these limitations and constraints so that your mind could be exposed. And I have two young children. And when we travel, like long car ride, long plane ride, like I avoid the screens. And like, for some parents, that's like brutal. And I know it could be, but it forces us all to be alone with our thoughts. And what naturally happens is we talk to each other and we come up with games. And again, like us older folks, like we remember like that was normal, but now everyone's kind of locked up in their screens and everyone's got this instant extraordinary power to just escape and be entertained. And so the easiest thing anyone could do, just be bored, be alone with your thoughts. And often, and a lot of us know that, like, sometimes the best ideas just come up in that way, whether it's in the shower or whatever we might be doing. But turn off all the noise, be alone with your thoughts in whatever way you could work that in. That would be the first thing. And I feel like it might be your commute to work, right? Just turn off the radio, whether you're driving or on the metro or biking, whatever it might be. Just turn off the noise and be alone with your thoughts. And there's no excuse not to do that.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm going to use that as a soundbite for me, be alone with your thoughts. And as I work with senior leadership teams, Mo, one of the things they always talk about is the challenge of we don't have enough time to be strategic or think strategically or, set time aside. And I love what you just talked about there, because you're not saying, hey, create a whole nother block of time to do this. What you're saying is find moments in your day when you can unplug, when you can tune out the noise and make that a part, at least from a starting standpoint. So I really like that idea of be alone with your thoughts. I think that's something that all of us can do, right away. I want to take a quick moment to thank everyone who's been sharing the Strategic Minds podcast. Your support is what helps us grow and reach more leaders who want to think and act strategically. If you've been finding value in these conversations, I'd love for you to follow in their footsteps. Share the podcast with a few friends or colleagues in your network who you think would benefit from becoming more strategic in their work. Your word of mouth makes all the difference, and I truly appreciate it. One of the things you talk about in the book, which I found really interesting, is that simple definition of mindfulness, which is just having your attention focused in the present moment. And talk to us a little bit about how we center ourselves to be in the moment, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of things that are distracting us, but talk a little bit about the benefits of being in the moment and what that can lead to.
Absolutely. And so the practice of mindfulness is, paying attention to the present moment with openness and curiosity. So also not like in a state of like things have to be great or things are terrible. So trying to remove any coloring and just experiencing just the raw reality. And in my mind, it's almost like just like that raw stream, right? Like, can we just take in that raw stream without trying to define it, trying to label it, trying to make it something, adding our natural sort of elements to it, whatever we might bias or whatever it might be, just kind of taking it in raw. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, a couple of different things happen. So first, it's very hard to do. And so we need something where we're trying to kind of use our mind to train our mind. And so it's almost like you have to come up with ways to do that. And the good thing, and the reason why you'll hear people often talk about it, our breath is always there. Our breath just happens. We're always breathing. And our breath gives us something that is more of like a bodily function, and the body doesn't lie. Like the mind could delude, could trick, could do all sorts of stuff, but our body has no choice but to be quite honest with us. And so the breath is always there, it's always accessible. And so using the breath as an anchor is how a lot of meditation is taught, and a lot of the meditation that we advocate. And the idea is just as you're alone with your thoughts or eyes closed or however you might do it, to simply use the breath as an anchor. Your mind wanders, to observe the mind. Don't get mad. Don't think you're gonna, be floating on air or transcend to some other plane. We're not talking about that. This is a basic exercise. Your mind will wander. That's okay. At some point you'll catch it wandering, and whatever point you catch it, that's great. And when you catch it wandering, just come back to the breath. And we repeat that practice over and over again. And what that helps with is it reduces the likelihood that our mind will just get hijacked, right? Like we're less likely to be reactive. We have a little bit of space before we respond, right? And so from react to respond, creating a little bit of space. Within that space, we're more likely to, make a better decision and be more graceful and remember our common humanity instead of just, wanting to tear things up and explode. And so that's the practice, and just being able to tap into that. And that's what I would advocate for. And often in our interactions with other people, like we've all been in situations where we're talking to someone and their mind's somewhere else and they're thinking about someone or something else, and it almost feels dismissive, and it doesn't feel very engaging. And so whether it's with our colleagues, whether it's with our employees or business partners or our kids, like simply being more in the moment, minus our minds just sort of spinning and ruminating about stuff, creates a better bond and allows us to connect much more effectively with one another.
Yes, I think that's very true, both like you said, professionally and personally. It creates a whole different depth of understanding, empathy, and conversation. So I love that part of it. You said a lot of interesting things there. I want to unpack a couple of them. One of them was creating space before we respond. I think that's a great learning for any of the leaders out there. As I work with teams, oftentimes one of the things that comes up as a challenge is firefighting, where we're overreacting to the urgent things that are popping up on text messages and emails. And so I love that idea. I think for any of you out there that find yourself or your team doing too much firefighting, take Mo's suggestion there and create some space between the event and the response. I love that idea, Mo. And then the other thing you talked about was removing the coloring. And that to me is fascinating too, because as I think about my own work, just being able to not judge things as good or bad or positive or negative, I think is very difficult to do. Any further tips or techniques that you would share with people on being able to remove the coloring?
That's a great question. And just to be clear, like in leadership, one of the key important skills is discernment, right? So I'm not saying don't judge ever.
Sure.
But there is in the moment, being able to be open allows us to receive, right? It's like, well, not to instantly shut things down. And, maybe you look at someone, you're like, oh, I already know everything about them. Let me just kind of already assume this, or you kind of hear something, you're like, oh, I already know and you shut it down, right? And so I'm not saying don't judge, don't discern, but the way that we receive, to be more willing and curious and open to receiving. And it is something that I would say it takes time, it takes practice, and it isn't like I'm not going to claim to never struggle with this, but it is something that you work towards. And one of the key things that happens as you pay attention and you do these practices, you'll be more likely to catch yourself when you're doing it, right? Like when you're automatically being dismissive, when you're automatically, and I do this at times, sort of like have this like know-it-all sort of hat on, right? And you're automatically like, and you can notice that. And when you notice that, then you shift it. Well, first you got to notice it, and then you can shift it. Sometimes simply noticing it is all that it takes. Like it doesn't take effort outside. It's one of these weird things where where just if you notice it, you shift. And it's sort of like I don't know if you ever you might have like your sort of like tensed up, and your shoulders might be tensed up, or your face might be tense, and then you're like, oh, I'm tense. And the second you notice it, it just drops. And you don't have to like force it. So there's a real danger in sort of forcing things. And within mindfulness and a lot of these practices, there's this just natural shift that happens with that repetition and doing the practice without sort of forcing anything or expecting an outcome or doing it for the sake of. Just with the practice and observing, the more you're able to kind of really see yourself and be self-aware, the more likely you're tuned in to your own tendencies and who you really are. Like that part of it, the parts of yourself that you might not want to acknowledge, and some of the beautiful parts of yourself that you might not realize.
Yes, yes. And the tuning in is a great metaphor. You used signal and noise before as well. But I'm just thinking, as I work with teams that are developing strategy, step one is often that situational awareness and being able to notice, as you talked about. And any experiences you've had with individuals or groups on helping them increase that situational awareness, that noticing. You talked about the obviously the importance of practice, being alone with our thoughts, that can help to do that. Anything else from as leaders are thinking about setting strategy in that important part of situational awareness?
Yes, and one of the things. So first, I would start with self-awareness. I think it's very difficult to like that. That would be step one, and I think it's very difficult to have situational awareness if you don't have self-awareness. And if you do have situational awareness, but you don't have self-awareness, then it might be difficult to share what you've discovered in ways that are effective and that rally folks around. So that's the first thing I would say. Then there is this. I think the best way I could put it, like often in strategy, it's like whoever could kind of hear the faintest noise, right? Whoever could kind of see the farthest, like you're looking for the faintest signals that others don't see often, because that's what differentiates sort of the winners and the losers, right? Like some people could see things further ahead, some people don't. And so being able to learn how to reduce the external noise, distraction, delusion, remove the filters, get to raw reality. Whoever's able to get to the kind of that raw reality best will be able to see what often is obvious, but we're also kind of caught up in the ideas of the old that we can't see it. Like sometimes, if you look historically, like some of the best innovations, and we look back, we're like, duh, like of course.
Right.
But when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to see. And so these practices will help kind of clear the fog. Sometimes it's fog, right? Where we might be dealing with mental things, that depression, anxiety, concerns, whatever. So sometimes it's fog. And then sometimes it's really just sharpening, where, we might not have that fog. We might be in a great place, but just to get through all the noise and to be in a place in which we see what others don't see, we've got to do things others don't do, right?
Yeah. One of the things you said there, I just jotted down because I'm going to use this, is a great question. What's the raw reality? Because I think to your point, Mo, oftentimes, and especially in corporations, we're afraid to point out the raw reality because I think sometimes we feel like that's a red flag. We're going to call attention to a weakness, and we don't want to be caught off guard. But I love that idea of the raw reality. So I think for all of us out there listening, that this idea of what is the raw reality of this situation, and to Mo's point, having that self-awareness first, then being able to have that collective awareness as we look at the business and get into that raw reality can be really powerful. Mo, I'd be interested. You just talked a little bit about seeing around corners, which is actually the title of a book by Dr. Rita McGrath, a great business strategist as well from Columbia. And I think that's a powerful way to innovate. And you talked about innovation just a moment ago. Any things that you've seen either with individuals or companies that you've interacted with on mindfulness and the contribution potentially to innovation?
Absolutely. And And I did grab a little quote that I share often because I find it's just a really powerful quote. And if it's okay, I'll share it, and then
Yes.
it ties right into this. And so this was from Professor Nancy Adler, and she was a chair of management at McGill University, one of the top universities in Canada. And she does this really interesting work around art and leadership. And so for me, I have a little bit of an artist sort of spirit in me, and I've always been fascinated by this. And she says, artists and leaders face similar challenges to see reality as it is without succumbing to despair, while imagining possibilities that go far beyond current reality. To have the courage to collude against illusion while articulating a possible future previously unimaginable, and to inspire people to surpass themselves individually and collectively for the benefit of all. And for me, that's always been just a real kind of deep hitter. And I go back to it. It's one of my North Stars. I have it handy. And especially nowadays with what's happening with the rapid rate of change, with AI, with everything that's happening around us. But back to your point, um, and so she's specifically talking about artists. And so like the first point, just to play with this quote, is to see reality as it is. And we just talked about this idea of being able to tune into raw reality. Like in order to create and innovate, you've got to be able to really see. Now, when you see reality, sometimes it's not pretty.
Right.
Sometimes it's really jarring. And so to be able to see reality, but not succumb to despair, right? And so mindfulness helps with that, like this idea of being open and not judging, like sort of seeing it and not being quick to say, oh no, like everything's going to burn down. Oh, it's the end of the world. Oh, and so being able to not react to, once you see reality, not to instantly sort of react to it. And then this idea of imagining possibilities, right? And so for me, like that, when we're alone with our thoughts, when we kind of get through all the repetitive stuff that's happening over and over and over again, it's like exercise. You got to get through like the 95% of the junk that you're just repeating in your mind over and over again to get to the gems. And so these practices help quiet the mind, help you dig, help you see. And so those possible future unlocks your imagination, like in ways, and some of the best ideas that I've had, and I think a lot of folks have been in the most odd moments where we're not necessarily thinking about anything, and it just sort of pops up. And then the last bit here around courage and articulating that future, I think it's important not only to be creative and innovative, but then to figure out how to communicate that, like to get people excited about it, to get people to see what you see, because sometimes you could be a little too far ahead, and there could be a lot of resistance and a lot of pushback. And so learning how to navigate that the best way possible.
Yeah, and one of the things we see with innovation is this idea of insight, and I define an insight as a learning that leads to new value. And I know you talk about the non-striving awareness potentially leading to insights. Maybe you can share a little bit, because insight is really important in business contextually to help us innovate, to help us think strategically about what's next, how to evolve. Share with us a little bit of your thoughts on that non-striving awareness and how that might lead to some greater innovation through insight.
Absolutely. I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
I attended one of these co-work spaces in DC, and they had an event, and the event was going, and then the fire alarm went off. And you've got a room of like entrepreneurs, kind of diehard go-getters. Fire alarm went off, so we all left, and then we're trying to get back in, and there was a door that was locked, and one of the folks there kind of took out the credit card and tried to do the old trick, and I was like, yeah, like I love that, like let's try, let's go. And then she could, this person couldn't get it, and then she kept trying, and then she kept trying, and then she went so far that like she cut herself because she was not, like, she was trying too hard, right? And we've all seen that. So at first I was like, yeah, and then I was like, whoa, like, hey, like, it's okay, like take it easy. And I feel like often there could be this, and we've all experienced it ourselves. Like I've certainly been in that situation. I've seen others in that situation where sometimes it's better to just go around, right? So instead of trying to go through that door, let's go try a different door. Like that other door in the back might be wide open, and we don't have to cut ourselves up and bang our head and make everything miserable. And so often I feel, and especially sometimes with age this happens, and sometimes with maturity, and sometimes with other things, but just understanding that just pushing and forcing doesn't always solve the problem. Sometimes taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and considering there might be other ways to do the same thing could not only create a more easeful life, but it could create much greater success.
Yeah, and that's a really instructive piece of guidance for a lot of the leaders out there. You've talked about some examples of friends that are those go-getters, those type A's that are always moving forward. What would your counsel be, Mo, for those folks that do start to get into mindfulness, that start to use it and see some of the benefits? How do you share with those folks some of the ways they can measure mindfulness? Again, there may be quantitative or qualitative, maybe it's habits that we start to see, but how would you suggest folks start to measure, at least for those folks that really want to know, am I making progress? What suggestions would you have?
Great question. So there are some formal assessments out there that folks could find that have been created by researchers, perceived stress scale, the 5-finger, and other ones that are out there. So there's those. There are technologies that could actually retail technologies that people could buy, different headbands and things that you could put on and do that. Sometimes people will track streaks and kind of keep track. It's nice to sort of have that regular practice. Like I'm a big advocate for regular practice. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of like the technology and all the devices. And even though I'm a tech guy and I've done some of these, and they're kind of cool, but it just feels like one more step. And it's like if I have to like buy equipment and sort of go get it and plug it and recharge it and like it just makes it more. It creates more barrier. But I'll tell you, for me, like when I was living in DC, since I've had kids, I've moved out. I was living in one of these old row homes that was converted to apartments. And as you go down the last set of stairs to go out the back, there was this low hanging overhead.
Yep.
And for me, when I was mindful, I would duck. When I wasn't mindful, whack, like I would hit my head. And that's how I knew. And I feel like we all have those instances where, we might be particularly clumsy. I remember during COVID, one time I left like my keys in the car. I left it running and I was like, oh man, I'm not being particularly mindful today. And so I think like we kind of know. In some ways, it could get a little dangerous, right? We could hurt ourselves. We might hurt others. And so I think we know, and then we also know from what it's like with others, and if we have close family or friends, like often they'll let us know. And just the way that we show up, things tend to go a little bit smoother and be a little bit easier when we're in more of a mindful state, when we're interacting with other people as well.
Yeah, one of the things, Mo, you shared with us earlier that was shocking to me was the research, and I think I'm going to make sure I wrote it down. 90% of thoughts are repeated daily. Wow, that is really shocking. So as you were just talking about, ways to measure this, I think one of the things I might start doing is just journaling. What are the new ideas that I had today, or the new thoughts that I had today, to see, because it feels like as I heard 90%, I said, well, that's not me. But now that as I've been running that through my mind a little bit, I'm thinking, yeah, probably that's pretty close. So I think even just journaling, what are the new thoughts that you're having could be a way to potentially start to monitor, am I progressing a little bit more on mindfulness?
And certainly, I think everyone will find different ways to kind of personalize to what makes sense to them. One thing that also might be worth doing is doing the practice, so you could really kind of tune in, but even capturing those thoughts that are reoccurring. Sometimes that helps put them to sleep, right? So that, like, oh man, I'm thinking about the renovation and I don't know, like over and over and over and over and every day, like, can I let go of that thing and create some space? We all do it, but just sort of like noting like, oh, I keep thinking about this thing. And sometimes there's a signal, right? It's like, hey, like, why do I keep thinking about this? Oh, maybe I need to talk to this person that I'm having a little bit of resistance to. And if I just get over that resistance and talk to them, all of a sudden it'll kind of free that space up.
Yes, and it's funny. I see that corollary in business. Oftentimes, when I'm observing executive leadership teams, they'll say, meeting after meeting, we have this two or three of these topics come up, and we thought we put them to bed, but they keep reappearing. And so I like that idea from a meeting standpoint. We see that, and then we talk about you need to make decisions, you need to cut things off, and I think that application applies here individually too. So I like that idea of not only recording the new thoughts, but recording what are the repeating thoughts that are coming up time after time. Why are they coming up? And then what can we do about those? So that's a great lesson or technique there as well. Mo, one of the interesting things you shared in our previous conversation, I'd love to get your thoughts on here, is this idea of balancing between responsiveness, and we talked earlier about creating space between an event and the response, and then sometimes we overly plan for things. So there's that balance between being responsive and planning. Maybe you could share your perspective, especially being a engineer by training and background. What's your perspective on the importance of responsiveness versus planning, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, it's tricky. So I tend to lean more. My natural leaning is more towards like a lot of structure, things sort of being set, control, sort of like predictable. Like that. That's what I lead. That's my natural setting. And what I've learned for me, like when you're naturally sort of lean one way, it's probably best to force yourself to lean the other way, right? And so I'll speak just from my own experience. So for me, like I have to almost force myself to be spontaneous. I have to force myself to say, like, you know what? I'm just gonna go wonder. I'm just gonna for me, it's so funny. Like I want to know the restaurant, make reservations, look at the menu. Like I want to have it all figured out, and I have to just like say, all right, I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna wonder. I'm gonna find a restaurant. I'm just gonna walk in, and for me, that's it forces me to kind of hone that muscle that's less familiar. For someone who might be already super spontaneous and might already sort of be like that, they might want to work on the other side of it, right? And so I think the first thing is to kind of figure out which way you lean. Are you more fluid, spontaneous? Are you more like structured, planner? And so that's good to know. And a lot of that comes from self-awareness or from what others might observe. And then lean into the discomfort and learn how to kind of step out of your sort of natural default mode. And when you do that, you'll find balance. And I find often in business, there is this real delicate balance of having structure, being fluid, and the people who've mastered that, and they know how to lean one way or the other, right? So sometimes, like if it's a service or product that's been out there, it's mature. Sometimes it's very structured, very processed, very, very predictable. If it's like a startup, a new idea, a new project, you can't treat it in the same way or you'll suffocate it before it even has life. And so sort of knowing how to shift and knowing what's appropriate and knowing your natural setting and knowing that balance is, I wouldn't say we always get it right, but sometimes you'll get it right, sometimes you won't, but to be willing to adjust and to learn to adjust by stepping into your discomfort and the other side of it.
One of the things, Mo, you talk about in the book is the practice, and you've mentioned the word practice a number of times, and exercise, which I love because I think that's very real world. That's very applicable to day in and day out. If we practice something, if we're doing deliberate practice, we're going to get better at it. Hopefully, if we've got the right guidance. Share with us a little bit. If folks are interested in the programs that you and your team deliver, what might they expect? What would be some of the benefits, some of the things that they could look for in order to enhance mindfulness beyond some of the foundational things that we've talked about here today?
Sure. And just to be clear, like in this mindfulness field, there's all sorts of stuff that's out there. I remember seeing people talking about how you could meditate COVID away. And, you could manifest millions of dollars and people who will have images of like the Buddha and religious symbolism and all sorts of stuff. So I just want to recognize that that and I've joked in the past, it's that it's kind of like crypto. Like you have like some really bad actors and you have some great actors, but it's just like this wild, wild west. And so to be careful when you're out there and looking for things. Now we've aligned ourselves with MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. It was developed by Professor John Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts and UMass Medical Center. And so it's been a real vetted program. Research, there's some issues with it, which I read about in the book, but it's definitely the most credible program out there. And so we do recommend folks to try to work with MBSR teachers and MBSR programs and to be really thoughtful about not looking for another escape. Like it's really easy to find like a guided meditation, to find some sort of guru kind of person that seems like they have all the answers, and to use it as another escape. And they'll take you for a nice ride. You'll leave feeling blissful and love and light and sort of floaty, but that's not going to get you anywhere. And so, the first thing I would warn people is if it's too easy and it feels good, you're probably in the wrong place. Because it's not supposed to be like that. Like there should be some difficulty with what we advocate for, and the way that we train folks. We want to get people meditating in silence on their own. We want to get them to a point that they don't need a teacher. We don't want to create a hook. We don't want to sort of like, kind of plant ourselves in their minds forever. We want to get them to a point that they can meditate on their own in silence. And anyone who's meditated on their own in silence knows it's very difficult. It's much more difficult. It's like meditating without the training wheels. I really, and then for some folks, they might need guidance. And then there's some rare instances where I think that you could you could kind of challenge that and say, oh, this person really needs guidance. But for most, you want to start with guidance, and you want the kind of guidance that will teach you how not to need it. I remember hearing once from I think it was like a coach or a teacher, and they said the best teacher, the best coach is the one that will set you up so you don't need them anymore. And that always sat in my mind. I was like, wow, okay, like that is like the ultimate goal, like to get someone to a point that you're no longer needed. Now we all have to figure out how to make a living, and so it's a little bit tricky to do that. But I do think it's very noble, and for us, like that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people to a point that they don't need us. And there are ways in which this work could be abused. Like people could use it for the sake of kind of having power and influence on others. And so I would just be very careful in selecting the right teaching and training and programs that you sign up for, and making sure I would recommend. There's a lot of good programs out there, but just is this program helping me learn to meditate on my own? Is this challenging? Is this something I would kind of debate? Like don't be careful with sort of the dazzling, blinky sort of lights and signals, right? Like if it feels too good to be true, it probably is. And so, and check out what Mindful Leader has. Like we've got a ton of good programs, but there are others out there within this MBSR umbrella that are worth checking out too.
Excellent. One of the other concepts I found fascinating, Mo, in your book was the idea of dialectical thinking in mindfulness. Maybe share with us a little bit of what that is and why it's important in the mindfulness space.
Absolutely. And I think it's important in the mindfulness space. I think it's important in the leadership space. I think it's one of the key, I think it's going to become a bigger and bigger theme. I first wrote about dialectic thinking 2.5 years ago or so, and the response has been phenomenal. It's one of our most read articles. And I think that it very in particular speaks to this moment of time. And so as we talked earlier, how the cell phone has given us endless entertainment and distraction, we're also very much being pushed towards our natural tendency, which is to be polarized, to see right and wrong, black and white, to pick a team, right? Like we are naturally wired to do that. Our brains are naturally wired to do that. In the book, it goes into a lot of the details and research around that. And at the same time, the algorithms are wired to force us there more. And we're at a point that like, neighbors won't talk to each other because they think, I'm on the red team, I'm on the blue team, and there's all this polarization, and families won't talk to each other, and everyone's so tightly kind of wound up. So just broadly speaking, there's this polarization. within the mindfulness field too, it's very easy to fall into this like just do nothing, let go, just don't judge anything. And if you take that to the extreme, you kind of become a walking zombie. Like
Right.
you're not like reacting to the world. Someone could come punch you in the face and you're just like, that's okay. And like we know that realistically that's not how you could live and survive in this world. And so within mindfulness, there's also this real kind of shifting kind of idea of, what is the right mentality. And often you can also create these echo chambers where everyone wants to think one way. Like the other side isn't allowed in the room. Like we don't want to even hear that. And
Mhm.
so I'm a staunch advocate for this idea of dialectic thinking to get us to just remember that idea of balance, almost like the yin and the yang, and sort of we have to find balance, to think in paradox. Like we could accept who we are fully and we could want to become a better person. Right. And so it's hard to always grasp that. But it's very important to the direction I believe the mindfulness field needs to go in.
One of the other things, Mo, that I'd be interested in your perspective with the things that you've written recently is mindfulness and the impact of AI. Obviously, we're seeing AI everywhere these days. How do you see it impacting the field? Will it be a positive? Will it be a negative? And maybe how do we start to harness that to help us?
Yes, and this is an excellent question. I think it's something that should be on everyone's minds. I was fortunate enough to stumble across ChatGPT 2 like early on and mess with it and sort of was there kind of watching the AI developments. And then when ChatGPT 3 came out, November 2021, I want to say, 2022. And I saw it, I was like, oh my God, like just having a technical background, just understanding like what the extraordinariness of what I was seeing. And then like I couldn't stop talking about AI for like 2.5, 3 years. And the joke that people would have is if you want to throw a conversation off, just bring up AI and Mo won't stop talking about it. And my counter was like, why isn't everyone talking about AI? Now they are,
Right.
but at that time, it hadn't quite caught on. And so for me, as I was thinking about AI, the question for me is like, let's look at history. Like there's these historical moments, and part of me is excited, part of me is concerned, and I think that's fair for us all to feel. But I went back and looked at history, and I saw this thing about like the end of the Bronze Age, and I was like, oh, interesting. Like, I don't why did the Bronze Age end? And then you have the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, you have all these different ages, the Industrial Age, and so humanity goes through these different ages. And as I was watching this documentary, at one point they put up this slide and they were like, with new ages come new beliefs, new religions, new currencies, new economies, new world powers, like new language, like like when you have a new age, like almost everything resets.
Mhm.
And paradigm shift is overused, but like you can't think about the age of AI the way that you used to. Like you've got to change your thinking, and we've got to understand that there's certain things that we won't fully grasp. But with that, I mean, just the extraordinary change that we'll go through. There's talk about abundance. If robots and AI could do everything, what are we as humans going to be left to do? Right. And
Mhm.
so there's talk about AI also becoming, extraordinarily wise and being able to kind of combine the wisdom of countless extraordinary people into one. And so new insights and so that you've got this combination of quite possibly our purpose and our meaning fundamentally will shift, and we'll have to kind of figure out what the heck are we doing here. We've got this extraordinarily fast change and rapid development that's very jarring for human beings. We've got these AI tools that will know us and see us in ways that are sometimes frightening. And Rich, I'll tell you a quick thing. Like I did this the other day. I asked my AI, I was like, we've been talking and interacting, and this is with ChatGPT because it saves things. And I said, what are my blind spots? I asked the AI, and the response was just, I just suggest to your audience to go try it, especially if you use like a chat GPT. You might be surprised. And I was quite surprised, and it was very valuable. But like all this could be very unsettling. And I do believe we're going to go into the worst mental health crisis that humanity has ever faced. Already addictions on the rise. Already, there's all sorts of like legalized drugs and things people have access to, and abuse and addiction, and all those things are extraordinary. Gambling, games, like we've got all these things that I feel maybe pulling us away from kind of the more contemplative things that have always helped ground us. And all those things are accelerating too. The loneliness epidemic, the extraordinary abilities of phones now, like are, just imagine 10x that with AI.
Right.
So I think we're on the verge of the age of AI, and I think everything shifts, and most people haven't really grasped that yet, and that it's going to be the greatest mental health tsunami that humanity's ever faced.
Yeah, and I think the things you've chatted with us today about, as far as meditation, how to start to build that mindfulness practice, are all going to be things that will, whether we want it or not, they're going to create an advantage for us, because we're not going to be swept up in that tsunami, whereas most people are, and we can keep our head above water, and we can see where we want to go and how we can get there. So great
Absolutely,
stuff there.
and to help our children, and to help our families, and to help our friends, right? Like, because it could get really rough, and so we need to be mentally strong enough to be able to help everyone else out.
Yeah, well said. So Mo, I'd be appreciative if we can close our conversation with your responses to 6 questions I call the strategic 6, just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better on the way out. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Number 1, what was your first job?
So, I'll tell you my first 2 jobs. It speaks a little bit about me. So I think I was 14 or so, or 15, I forget, but I was working at the library shelving books. And I was terrible. I'd pick up a book and start reading it, and then like the books would pile up, and I quit. I feel I'm sorry to those folks, because like the books just kept piling up. And then I worked at AMC Theater, and I had a blast. And that was kind of more like, it was just a lot more lively. Did everything from like popcorn to eventually projectionists. While in high school, and this is back when we actually had projectors, and there was film. Like I remember like the film
Right.
burning and splicing the film. So that would be my response.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like your curiosity started early on with the books in the library, so I love that. Number 2, what's your favorite vacation spot?
Ooh, that's always a tricky one. I remember I went on a remote wedding with quite some time ago, and there's an older gentleman there, and I asked him the same question, and he said, I'm going to steal his answer, but he's like, my favorite vacation spots wherever I happen to be vacationing now. And so, there's definitely I like more like warm weather at times, and the beach, and there's a couple different spots, but I try to. Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, like I love going to the Outer Banks with the kids, and it's close by. So that's definitely
Sure.
one of my favorites. But we like experimenting, and taking that attitude of wherever we are, whatever the season, like let this be my favorite, because here I am.
Love it. Number 3, what's the one word that best describes you?
Well, part of me wants to say blank, because I feel like it's very dangerous to be described by one word. I like to keep it a mystery and sort of leave it vague. Maybe vague.
Vague. All right, that'll work. Number 4, what one book has had significant impact on your development?
Boy, there's been so many, but early on I read Built to Last and Good to
Hmm.
Great. Like those two just really, it was
Yeah.
very early on, and a lot of those ideas and concepts were very new to me, but left a very strong impression from the
Okay,
business
great.
side.
Number 5, what's the one piece of advice that would fit on a bumper sticker that you'd like to share with people?
I have mixed feelings about the bumper stickers. I'll tell you just very quickly. I wrote this whole article about how these like "Be Kind" sort of posters were actually not effective. And that really, if you want people to be kind, talk about the golden rule, because that's actually a lot more effective. It's more nuanced.
Sure.
And it might take more space in the bumper sticker, but maybe just remember the golden rule. I think that's a good one. But to be careful not to make things too kind of catchy, and give a little bit of complexity, because that stuff tends to work better and have more impact.
Yes, makes sense. Number 6, what's the most exhilarating moment that you've experienced in your professional life?
So recently, there's quite a few, but recently we launched the Meditate Together app, which is just an app that we built, and we did it with a pretty tight budget. And it's something I always wanted to do, and it's something that was self-funded. So for me, and it was rough. The first week was very rough. I'm not gonna lie. I think I've never been that close to a heart attack. And given all the practice I do, I mean, it was rough. But we got through it. And when we got through it, there was this elation and just this extraordinary, wow, we actually did it. And we have a running, this is something that was on my mind for about 5 years, and then finally kind of took the step and did it. And it was hard and difficult, but got through it and felt great after.
Wonderful. And so, Mo, where can people find you, find more information about you and your work? What would be a good spot or two?
Mindfulleader.org is where all the things that we do. I'm also active on LinkedIn, always happy to link with folks. And the book, if you just Google Open MBSR, you'd find it there.
Yeah, excellent. So here's the copy. We will put links to Mo's website, to his LinkedIn profile, to the book as well on the show notes. So take a look there. But Mo, really wanted to say thank you very much. You've given us a lot of great tools, tips, techniques today to enhance our mindfulness so that we can perform better both in our professional and personal lives. So thanks so much for being my guest on the show.
Thanks, Rich. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me.
What are we talking about? Practice?
Practice makes perfect. Practice makes profit.
Gallup research shows that the number one reason a person leaves a company is because of the actions or inactions of their manager. Leadership matters a lot. One of the biggest frustrations of workers stems from a leader being inconsistent. In sports such as basketball, football, soccer, coaches and players' number one request of the officials is simply to be consistent in their calling of the game. A technique you can practice to become a consistently effective leader is to develop and apply leadership principles. Leadership principles are guidance on the appropriate actions for those who set direction and serve others to achieve goals. Typically, 5 to 10 principles are enough to provide that consistency in leadership. To develop your leadership principles, consider the best practices you've observed and used to set direction and support others in the achievement of collective goals. For example, leadership principles I've worked with executives to create include lead at our level and don't do our direct reports' work. Second one is agree or disagree in meetings, but then fully commit to the decision. And a third one is give people our full attention during meetings and don't check your phone. Being a leader of others is a privilege, not a right by title. Treat it as such by practicing your leadership principles every day.
I appreciate your strategic mind.
Must have a strategic brain, mind.
Great strategic minds of tomorrow right here.
In this segment, The League of Strategic Minds, I answer questions submitted by listeners. Today's question: how do you define leadership? I define leadership as the ability to set direction and support others in the achievement of goals. The best leaders I've worked with are able to articulate a clear vision for where the team is going and then able to provide them the necessary support, training, resources, and guidance to help them get there. If you have a question you'd like answered, visit the Strategic Minds page on the website strategyskills.com and complete the brief submission form. If your question is selected, you'll receive some strategic swag for your contribution.
Any insights?
You play to win the game.
Any further insights?
You don't play to just play it.
Insightful.
I want winners.
I played the game to win.
I want people that want to win.
It's very insightful.
To close today's show, our Winsight, or idea for advantage, comes from David Novak, former CEO of Yum Brands, who said, "Take time to reflect. It's the stillness that leads to the action. How much time are you investing in reflection each week? Let's step off the activity treadmill for at least 30 minutes each week and ask ourselves, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how could we do it differently or better? Thank you for listening to today's episode of Strategic Minds. I hope this conversation gave you some valuable insights that you can apply to your business and put into action. If you found this episode helpful, we'd greatly appreciate it if you'd leave a short review, maybe even a 5-star review on your podcast player. And thank you to everyone who's been sharing the podcast. Your support really helps us grow and make the world a little bit more strategic. If someone in your network could benefit from this conversation, please feel free to share it with them. If your team is ready to strengthen its strategic thinking and planning skills and get beyond the day-to-day tactical grind, visit strategyskills.com. There you can explore our workshops, online courses, strategic coaching, free Strategic Thinker newsletter, and my latest book, Strategic. You can also take your leadership development to the next level with the Strategic Fitness System, our state-of-the-art executive development platform. Until next time, remember, be strategic to be your best.